information. What do we know?
Yes. So just reading through this now, we do know that the Supreme Court has ruled to uphold the ban, uphold the law, right? So there was a big challenge that whether this was unconstitutional, whether it violated free speech. Right now, the Supreme Court has decided that this law can stand. And of course, now it's going to be a question of what goes on once the president-elect takes office, because the Biden administration reportedly may not enforce the ban. But we do know that the Supreme Court has ruled that the ban is okay to be upheld.
So the Supreme Court not jumping in here to save the day for TikTok. The small business owners and content creators won't be happy to hear this, because the platform they've used to grow a following, to earn money potentially, will now be banned. Sunday, as you mentioned, President Biden said he won't intervene to get in the way of this. But President-elect Trump has seen the benefit of TikTok. He's credited the platform with helping him get into the White House. So what does this mean in the very short term for all of these people on the platform who don't know what will happen come Sunday and Monday?
Okay, so a couple of things. In the most immediate short term, the law says that come Sunday, Apple, Google, these app stores, they cannot have the app in their app stores for those in the U.S. So if you don't have TikTok on your phone, you're not going to be able to download it come Sunday. Now, TikTok is reportedly considering not just, okay, we'll still allow people who are using the app to have access to it. They are reportedly considering completely shutting down access for all users. So that's sort of the first question of what might come Sunday for those of us that do have the app on our phones. Then you take this out a little bit further. There's the question of, would President-elect Trump sign an executive order that would roll back this law? There's a lot of legal questions for those that are far more smart in that world than me to answer of whether that would be possible. But the broader picture is people who use this for their business, for their brand. I've talked to many of them. They're pretty worried because TikTok versus Instagram, you have different audiences there.
Yeah, President Trump being sworn in noon Monday. So if this could be part of his first few official acts, it's still unfolding. Kelly O'Grady, thank you so much. Let's also bring in CBS News legal contributor Caroline Polisi. Tell us what you know about the Supreme Court's decision so far and what this means for people who truly do rely on the app right now.
Yeah, well, it literally just dropped. I would say from what I've skimmed through, it's not surprising. The First Amendment arguments here on behalf of TikTok really weren't that strong. You know, we're calling it the TikTok ban, but really what this was a bipartisan supported legislation that Congress passed about corporate structures, really, to preserve national security. And it relates to ByteDance, the parent company that owns TikTok. And essentially, the argument was that the ban would violate free speech implications. But, you know, the First Amendment can take a back seat to other certain issues. And in this case, it's national security. The concern is that China may be stealing our data, spying on us, you know, all the things that we've heard. You know, you just reported what could happen. Trump, I mean, this bill was spurred because in Trump's first term, he wanted to sign an executive order getting rid of TikTok. And so that raised sort of, you know, Congress's eyebrows and got this issue on the table. So this idea that Trump could potentially sign an executive order and sort of wave a magic wand is not legally accurate, right? So you can't just sign an executive order and make congressional legislation go away. It could be a sort of Band-Aid. You know, he could say, you know, we're extending implementation of the law for 30 to 60 days while we give ByteDance the chance to divest the TikTok company to an American-owned company, which is what the law says. Essentially, TikTok would have to sell to an American-owned company. There's been a lot of sort of whisperings about potentially Elon Musk stepping in to buy the company, but ByteDance says that's pure fiction. They clearly don't want to sell. So, you know, there's a lot of legal implications here. As noted, he could just direct his Justice Department, Trump, not to enforce the ban. But, you know, if I'm the general counsel at Apple or Google that's you know, selling this app, I wouldn't, you know, be too comfortable continuing to market and sell and provide TikTok to users, even in the face of Trump saying he wouldn't move forward with implementing, enforcing it.
I mean, it's fascinating for you to lay out the potential options for the incoming President-elect Trump, because all of a sudden his inauguration Monday carries with it two significant developments from the hostage release deal between Israel and Hamas. And now Trump has a decision to make on what to do for TikTok. I understand that in addition to Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, and other tech billionaires, that the CEO of TikTok's U.S. subsidiary is expected to be at inauguration. So before we let you go, help me understand the options that Trump has, either in what he can do or what he can encourage his Republican majorities in Congress to do. For example, there's been a suggestion to propose an additional delay somehow of the bill. What options are on the table? Yeah,
and I would note the CEO is not only invited to the inauguration, but apparently he will be seated very prominently close to sort of prime time, which I think tells you a lot.
That's a very significant detail.
It is. And, Trump has been very outspoken in wanting to save TikTok. He sees it as a place where people like him. He's been very outspoken about this. He, submitted a brief in the Supreme Court case when he was not even a party to it, saying basically he's the only person that has sort of the political power, mandate, and business acumen to deal with the issue. But, it's not that easy, unfortunately. I think the easiest way out, instead of it's kind of hard to overturn legislation. He would have to really push a bipartisan effort, and it takes time. It's not again, you can't wave a magic wand. I think the easier path would be to try to find an extension of implementation of the ban and try to find a buyer. But again, that is contingent on, for whatever reason, it seems pretty clear ByteDance doesn't want to sell to an American buyer, even though they stand to make billions of dollars on this entity, and you have to ask yourself why.
At the very least, all the people who use this app are likely freaking out at the moment, because the TikTok they've used for so long is effectively coming to an end. Caroline Polisi, we really appreciate your insight. Thanks so much for joining us. We want to quickly cross over now to CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Zhang. Weijia, this decision just handed down by the Supreme Court. What's the latest from the Biden administration?
Well, the Biden administration has not responded directly to the Supreme Court decision. However, Errol, it has issued a statement to make clear that it will not be the Biden administration that is implementing the law that goes into effect on Sunday. Now, as Caroline laid out, this was bipartisan legislation, but to be clear, President Biden signed it, so it is the law of the land. And even though there may be an option to pause on implementing for 90 days, that is an exemption only if there is active conversations and movement in a potential sale. But as Caroline also said, and this is really important, that doesn't exist. ByteDance has made very clear they do not have any intention of selling. So as far as what the White House is saying now, they're saying our position on this has been clear. TikTok should continue to operate, but under American ownership. Again, that doesn't seem like it's happening anytime soon. Goes on to say, given the timing of when it goes into effect over a holiday weekend, a day before inauguration, it will be up to the next administration to implement. So the message from here is, we're on our way out. We're gone. So it's up to President-elect Trump and his team to do something about making sure the law is carried out. Now, it is important to note that the incoming National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, did have an interview just a few days ago. And during that, he said, we will put measures in place to keep TikTok from going dark. But there aren't that many options that they have on the table right now, Errol. So it will be interesting to see what they might propose. But what actually happens is that at some point they're going to have to implement the law of the land, which is a ban on TikTok in the U.S.
Yeah, and Ouija, help us understand, especially for those who are likely making some content for TikTok right now, why this app was considered so dangerous by Congress when our Facebooks, our X platforms, and others also gather our data, listen to microphones, perhaps watch through our cameras, just as much as any other apps. Why was TikTok specifically seen as such a specific national security threat by DC?
Errol, this is such a critical question, and I really do think that, as we have the conversations about how people use and rely on TikTok for their livelihoods, the question is, at what cost, right? And the reason why this was passed is because lawmakers on both sides of the aisle were really worried that because of the Chinese involvement here, the parent company ByteDance, affiliated with China, that the Chinese government could be receiving data about the millions and millions of Americans who use this platform. That's why it's different, because when you're talking about Meta, when you're talking about X, these are American companies. And so when you have a U.S. adversary that is potentially collecting all this critical data on American citizens, then of course it is a much different story, which is precisely why lawmakers passed this bill to begin with. And I think that, that is the question that national security experts continue to pose, which is, at what cost are you willing to give up your data? But we have seen, and you have reported on, this wave of TikTok users making the decision to download and use a Chinese government-owned app called Red Little Book, I believe. And so they're sort of protesting and saying, it's worth it to us. We have done the risk-benefit assessment, and for us, it is worth it to have another government know whatever they can glean on, what content we choose to look at on TikTok.
Yeah, you're so right about that. There's national security components, tech components, but there's so much emotion felt by its users. They seem very attached to this platform for so many reasons. Ouija Zhang giving us the latest there from the White House. I want to now cross back with CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady, who is still here with us. For some who may be older, they look at this platform as something that the kids can dance on. But you know full well from your reporting that for many of its users, it's so much more serious than that.
It is. And in fact, I interviewed a family of folks who are from Nashville, and they were living on teacher salaries before they started on TikTok. They started making, family-friendly comedy videos, and they now make a living from this. And so I kind of pressed them. I was like, well, why TikTok versus an Instagram or a Snap or some of these other apps?
Yeah, why is this different?
Exactly. So what they said to me was, look, the editing tools, the creator tools that TikTok offers are far more advanced, far more easy to use than what they've seen on Instagram. They actually edit all of their videos on TikTok. And the other thing is the algorithm. They're able to reach, for some reason, a lot more people. And one of the girls showed me a number of videos. She said, this one, I posted the exact same video on TikTok and then on Instagram. It got over 1 million views on TikTok. And then on Instagram, it only got a couple 100,000. Same content. Video. Yeah, and there were tons of examples of that. And so that's the sort of the crux of it, that people find this really, really beneficial for their income, whether it's full-time or supplemental.
And TikTok also made it very easy for people to sell products, get a commission,
yes.
A whole nother component that Instagram was slower to develop. This is uncharted territory to some extent for the US, but this did happen in India. How might that help us look at what might happen next?
It's a great case study of what could happen. So India saw this ahead of time, and they said, look, we're going to ban this app. This goes back to summer of 2020. And the big benefiter was Instagram. It blew up in the country. So many users flocked to Instagram. And what was interesting to see happen is there was a bifurcation of who succeeded on the platform. So people that already had big names, lots of followers, it was a snowballing effect when they moved over to Instagram. But kind of those smaller creators, more followers than I have, Errol, but those with,
that's a big deal.
1 million and whatnot are still considered small. They really struggled to gain traction in India. And so that's kind of potentially something that could happen if there's no solution when it comes to buyers or delays with the next incoming administration, you could see those smaller businesses, smaller influencers try and get that same traction on these other apps and maybe not succeed as much.
Yeah, and it's a wake-up call that this impacts people's lives, people with middle, low income, some people who are unemployed. They have been relying on this platform and the creativity that it provides. Thank you so much. My thanks to Caroline Kelly-Weija. We will have more continuing coverage on the Supreme Court decision in just a few moments. Thank you. But we do want to include some other major headlines. Fire crews making progress containing those flames in Los Angeles, but there is a new threat residents have to worry about. We're live on the ground with that. Stay right where you are. You're streaming CBS News 24/7.
Is there no room for debate on college campuses anymore? 60 Minutes brings you to the new university that is demanding it.
The stakes are that high.
If our universities are screwed up, and I believe they are,